Podcast by Friday, episode 32.
A content creation goal is very important for you, for your podcast.
Podcast by Friday with Bill Griggs and Kingsley Grant. We help people to create their minimal viable podcast by taking bold action to defeat procrastination and to get their voices heard.
I'm Kingsley Grant.
And I'm Bill Griggs.
And you're listening to
Podcast by Friday.
Hey, Bill.
Kingsley, I'm very happy to be here with you today on episode 32.
And I'm looking forward to this episode because I think it's really very, very pertinent, especially at this time of year to get close towards the end on goal setting.
Yeah, we're at the time of year when most people begin to consider things about, where they are, where they want to go, what they want to do for the year. And for us, one of the things that we like to do is to set new goals because we want to achieve something special, and we have things that we want to get done.
Yeah, and our listener, I'm sure, also wants to do the very same thing. And that's why I like the fact that the show is going to be focused on how to achieve your goals, right? And that is really, I think, a very key and pertinent and timely episode we're doing today that I'm sure that will be very helpful to our listener as he or she listens to this episode.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have an idea of what it is that you want to accomplish when it comes to goals, because otherwise you're just going to wander around aimlessly, and you won't know when you've achieved the success that you possibly could. So it's very important to know and have an idea of what it is that you want to accomplish.
Been there, done that. Yeah.
Yeah, we last year when we got started doing these episodes, we were kind of negligent. We didn't really discuss our goals, where we wanted to take this podcast until about February or March of 2017, and that was, well into the year for us. And I think the podcast suffered a bit because of that.
Yes.
Yeah,
I agree. Yeah. And I think, I look around and we look at, which we'll get into in a few moments, about some statistics about people who set goals versus those who don't. And I think we found ourselves to be among those who did not, and the consequence of that was very evident, I'm sure, as you described just now. So, Bill, I think the question that I believe most people may not even have, well, I wouldn't say most people, but some people don't take into consideration is, why do we set goals? Because we hear the term and we hear the call and people set goals. But I believe we need to kind of slow it down and ask the question, why?
Okay, Kingsley, I'll bite. Why?
Go for it and just let me hear your thoughts on that.
I know that when I take the time to set a goal, and I'm not just talking about the mental process of setting a goal, I'm also talking about the written goal, where I actually write down what it is that I want to achieve, then I have a better idea of what it is that I want to accomplish. Because I know that if I'm starting with a destination in mind, I'm more likely to get there than if I'm just shooting at random at something like, I want to make more money. Okay. How much more? Is $1 more going to be sufficient? Or do I need to make $10,937.52? If I write that one down, well, there's a very good chance that, I will know how to aim.
I listened to a podcast this morning, and the host was reading a question and answer, and he shared about someone who had a goal. They were making $52,000 in 2015 or 16, and then their goal they set a goal to make $100,000 in 2017. And as of this recording, the year is almost over. They've made $104,000 this year already, double their amount. And the question was, they want to set a goal for $160,000 for the next year. And I was wondering that, the cost of that for them, they don't know if they want to pay their price family-wise. And of course, those are things that you have to factor in. But the point is, they wrote down, as you just said, they wrote down they want to make 100,000, and they've surpassed that already. So I believe that we have to set goals to have an idea of what we want to accomplish. Because as you described, is it something you want to, as you said, $1 more, or whatever it might be. And I think if we start with that and have an idea, then we can begin the process of working towards those goals, right?
Mm-hmm. And just on a quick side note, I mentioned to you having Chris Guillebeau on my other podcast, the CNC Router Tips podcast, where he discussed creating a side hustle business. And one of the first things that he does in that book is he tells you to write down what it is that you want to have a goal and to work your way backwards from that. And because of that, getting that established early on in the process, you're more likely to succeed and achieve what it is that you were going for. So I think the statistics of this are borne out by this. And let's go a little deep into statistics for just a brief second here, Kingsley. When you look at stats that you can find just through a quick Google search or whatever about goal setting versus those who don't set a goal, you'll find that people who have written goals are 50% more likely to achieve them than those who don't.
Wow.
50%. That's like giving somebody a head start.
Yes.
Just for writing down what it is that they want to achieve, and they're more likely to do it than if they don't write it down.
The shocking part of this, the statistics you just read, and we kind of discussed this prior to recording, as about when we came across a number like only 3 out of 100 adults.
That's 3%, yeah.
Might write down their goals on paper. I'm guilty, and this is full transparency. I have not gotten into full writing my goals. I'm a whole lot better now than I used to be. I never, it was all in my head, and I think, I have all these ideas what I want to do, and we know that we mentioned the question why we set goals, because we don't know where we're going. We'll never know when we get there, right? But in my head, I had all this destination I want to get, but I never wrote them down. And you know what, Bill? I've seen where most of those things were not accomplished.
Yeah. If you don't write it down, there's no permanence to it. Your mind doesn't accept it as real. But once you've taken the physical act of writing it down, and then periodically looking back at it, and rereading it frequently, then you know what you're shooting for. And it's been my experience that when I do that, when I set a goal and write it down, I usually just bust it wide open and go way beyond what that original goal was. It's happened in my Facebook group. It's happened in my business. It's happened in so many different areas of my life. And, it gets borne out time after time. Inc. magazine did a whole series of articles based on this, and it indicates that, 92% of the people out there don't achieve their goals because they don't write them down.
Yeah.
That's most people.
And that's why I think we want to, hopefully this episode will help you as you're listening in to realize the importance of writing your goals down, because if you want to be the 3% or the 8% that achieve your goals, and not the 92% who have not, then writing those goals down, right? Have an idea of what it is you want to accomplish. Write that down is, as Bill said earlier, will give you a head start, and you are very much on your way to achieving your what you have set out to do.
Yeah, it is no accident that 1% of the people in the world own, the majority of the wealth in the world. And I bet you, although I have nothing to prove it, that those people wrote down their goals, because the number is very close, 1 to 3%. So if for no other reason than that, you want to be in that 1%, that's my thought.
And I wholeheartedly agree, Bill. And I think so. I think we made a point. And if we have not convinced you by now that you need to write your goals down, I'm not sure what else will. But I believe you're convinced. So we want to kind of move on then to how. How do we set goals? Because I think that might be, for some people, the hold up. They know they need to they need to have goals. Some even have heard they need to write their goals down. But I think the struggle for some is how. How do they go about setting those goals? And maybe this might be very helpful as we go into sharing with you as you're listening, how to do that, right? Mm-hmm. And I want to share one of the first thought that comes to my mind, because I remember reading Stephen Covey's book many, many years ago, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of the things he mentioned in that book was to start with the end in mind, write it down. And I think that is one of the biggest takeaway for me from his book. And I don't always do this, Bill, but I when I remember and I do that by looking at what is it that I want to accomplish, start with that in mind and work backwards. Mm-hmm. That has been a tremendous help for me.
Yeah, I know that last year was an aberration for us. We both have been, folks who write down their goals. I mean, I knew that when I first met you. You knew that when you met me. We've had written goals and written things we desired, and we just got so busy doing the podcast and trying to move forward that we didn't write things down until later. But I will tell you, the fact that we wrote them down. At all, even if it was late, was still a better way for us to achieve, because we were able to pick where we were trying to go and work our way backwards and break it down and look at it. What do we need to achieve? Okay, we've got less time. Instead of 12 months, now we've got 8 months or 9 months. How do we break our goal down by doing that? And that's to start with that goal in mind and divide it and work backwards from it.
And I think that's a key part, and then I find that if we now look at what are the tasks that makes up that goal. So, because it's a task that we're going to be doing, the action steps we're going to be doing, right? So how we set goals is then to break down, I believe, that goal that you have in mind in small bites. And those tasks you can now work on to achieve what it is you describe as your overarching goal.
Well, let's give our listeners maybe an example. Okay, so let's pick one goal that we've set and discuss maybe some of the tasks that are involved with it.
Well, I think our goal to start this podcast, right, was we had gone to podcast movement, and we wanted to get this podcast done by Friday.
Yeah, and that left us with a lot of stuff. Yeah.
So we discussed then basically what were the tasks we need to accomplish to get that goals. And you remember when the first thing was to secure the name, the URL by purchasing the domain, right? Mm-hmm. That was done.
Yeah, that was one of the first things we did. Then we had to come up with some artwork for our podcast and agree on what we wanted to see.
And I think, as we are doing about this, if you go back to the podcast episodes 19 through 29, all we're discussing here basically were those tasks. We broke down, our artwork, right? Then we decided what kind of music we wanted to have as a background music to the podcast. Mm-hmm. We then found that music and got that in place.
Yeah, and we also had to decide on the format of the show and, many other tasks. So there were several tasks that we had to achieve. And if we had just gone off and started doing stuff instead of writing down what it was we wanted to achieve task-wise and dividing it up between the two of us, we would have never launched our show in a week like we did.
And, which I think is so, one of the things we've heard, and as you're listening, I'm sure I won't not say I'm sure, possibly you've heard about SMART goals. And one thing I've found is it helps, yes, it's been used in so many ways, but I still believe it does help, especially in this how we set goals idea. And it's the SMART, this specific goals. So it must be S, it's specific. M, it must be measurable. A, is it attainable? R, is it realistic? And time bound. And so when we go back to Podcast by Friday, it was very specific, very measurable, right? We could attain it because we had some experience in podcasting, and we know that we could find the resources. We know where to find what we need the help from. It's very realistic to us. I mean, to some people it may not be, right? But they're new at this whole thing, and it was time bound by Friday. So that was a very smart goal approach we used, and it helped us to get that goal accomplished.
Yeah, it did. And it's funny, if we had just set a reasonable goal, we would not have probably achieved the success that we did, because there was nothing really driving us. Well, let's set up a podcast and we'll give ourselves 3 months to get it going. Yeah, that's the way most people do. But we set a goal that we had to stretch to release, to achieve. It was a stretch goal instead of a reasonable goal. And I think that is the thing that drives it, the momentum going, because you're going to have to work hard to get it. Otherwise, it's not worth it.
And I agree, because, like I mentioned about the podcast I was listening to, and the question that was asked, and the host was saying, well, because he felt very comfortable he could do $160,000 in this coming year. And the host was saying, well, that if you feel very comfortable, why not stretch yourself and go a bit beyond that? Why not set a goal to double from $104,000 to $208,000? But it was like saying, I feel that I could do 160, but what I'm hearing you're saying, there's time we need to stretch ourselves. And that's, I think, in the business world, the BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goals is what kind of covers that idea. It's big, it's hairy, it's audacious. I think was, in the United States, one of our past presidents, John F. Kennedy, who said that let's get to the moon. And at the time, people think was, what? It was big, it was hairy, it was audacious. But you know what? We did it.
Yeah. And he set a time frame. He wanted to do it that decade.
10 years.
Yeah. And, we basically were starting from almost zero in the space program. There were a few scientists out there who had some ideas, but nobody was doing it in a systematic, focused way where they were shooting all their resources towards achieving that goal. I mean, we were in a race, and goal setting needs to be like that. I just want to give one more example of somebody who set an audacious, a big, hairy, audacious goal. And that's our friend Angel Jones, who does 12-Minute Convos podcast. And he set his sights on having more podcast episodes out there than John Lee Dumas, who is the affirmed leader with the most podcast episodes ever. And he wanted to do that in a short period of time. And so what number is he up to? He's up to 890 or something like that episodes.
I think no, he's in 1400 or no, he's in that four figures.
Okay, and
yeah,
and just in just a short period of time, I know that he has just been crushing it, and at the pace he's set, he will eclipse John Lee Dumas before the end of the year.
I know I see him every now and then. He shows a picture of his goals. He writes down how many podcast episodes he needs to do in that recording that one day or that 1 week. And when I look at that, I'm saying, man, this is crazy. This guy is out. Actually, he wanted to. I think the last time he did this whole goal setting thing, to be the Guinness Book World Record holder of the most podcast episodes to have been ever recorded. And he fell short. But the point is that he accomplished a whole lot more than he would have had he not set these goals.
Yeah. And it's all in how you set your goals. You got to go out and stretch yourself and set big, hairy, audacious goals.
And so we then cover it in how to set goals. We talk about start with the end in mind, start at the end and work backwards, work on tasks those to reach a goal, and to the SMART goals aspect, and how to stretch yourself, and the big, hairy, audacious goals. So we talk about how to set goals, Bill, which I think is so very important, and we discussed the why earlier. Now, when do we do this? Because do people wait until the beginning of the year? Do they do it in the first quarter? Do they do it in on their birthday, their anniversary? When do we set these goals?
Well, if you're most people, and if you recall, most people don't achieve their goals. But if you're most people, you never worry about it. You don't even address it at all. The majority of people who do set goals, whether they're written or not, do that at the beginning of the year. It's the whole New Year's resolution thing going through their mind. Everybody says, I'm going to lose weight. Okay. That was their thought. They never wrote it down and said, I'm going to lose 97 pounds or whatever, or set a specific goal. So, the timing is everything when you set a goal. And if you're going to follow the pattern of setting your goals at the beginning of the year, which is actually something we do, make sure you write them down. Now, moving on.
I want to kind of share a brief story here, personal story, because when I say that, sometimes we mention how we did not start last year at the beginning of the year. We did it in February, March, thereabouts. We'd start writing down our goals, and we were still able to accomplish some of those goals because we wrote them down. Mm-hmm. This year, 2017, I know I was a bit overweight, since you went to the weight idea here. And I had gone and saw a picture of myself one time, and I was without my shirt, and I'm thinking, no. My family and my daughter, my wife would compare me with a family friend and say, a family of ours, and say, oh, Kingsley, your gut is becoming like so-and-so. And I'm thinking, oh no, that comparison is just a bit too much, is over the top, compare with something that's not him, anyway. So I decided in June thereabouts, my wife and I had gone on vacation. We came back and we had, all inclusive. So of course, all the food you can eat and the alcohol you can drink and all of those things.
On your cruise, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I came back and I'm thinking, like, you know what? This is it. I'm going to take my weight under control. So in the end of May of this year, 2017, we decided to start a diet kind of / exercising. Not a huge diet, but because I don't believe in these diet things and, you lose weight, you gain weight, you lose weight, that kind of stuff. But fast forward here, we did a tomato soup diet, and then we did a all greens diet later on, and just as smooth as really. And Bill, I was able to lose 20 pounds and went down 2 pant sizes, but I didn't start at the beginning of the year. I started in June. So my whole point is that you can start whenever you want to start. Yes, mm-hmm. It's best to have a good marker to kind of say, okay, let's kind of join the throng. But I believe it's whenever you feel, you know what, I need to change something. I need to get some things in order, and I want to get started. So my point is, start it whenever you feel like. However, there's some good markers that are helpful, and the beginning of the year is one of those.
Kingsley, when you set your goal for losing weight, did you have a specific amount of weight that you wanted to lose?
10 pounds. My first set was 10 pounds. I want to lose 10 pounds first, and then I brought down. Okay, so I decided I want to lose a pound, and it was like a week, and then a pound, 2 pounds in 2 weeks, that kind of stuff. And I work towards 10 pounds, and then I was able to just kept going.
So not only did you set a goal, 10 pounds, but you broke that goal. You got 20 pounds of weight loss when it was all said and done. Total.
Yes.
Yeah. So you doubled what it
I
was
did.
you set because you had a specific goal in mind.
Bill, you know why I didn't go 20 pounds right away? I in my head, I was fearful I may not make it.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't go there right away. I figured I could do 10.
Yeah.
So but it was not big, hairy, audacious for me. It was like, oh, it's kind of comfortable. I probably could do that, you know?
Imagine if you had set your stretch goal to lose 50 pounds or 30. Well, you'd probably be too skinny at 50 pounds because you're in pretty good shape.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not 50 pounds bit too much, you know, but
Yeah.
I get your point, you know?
Yeah. So, there's nothing, we're talking about setting goals at the beginning of the year, but there's really nothing special about the first of the year. It's just a marker that we all have in our mind. We can say, okay, that was then, this is now kind of thing at the beginning of the year. But there's nothing wrong with setting your goals at some random time in the year. For instance, things may be cruising along for you or not going the way that you want. And if you resolve to set your goal to achieve something, whenever it is, you can still go forward with it. I mean, I wanted to buy a milling machine for my business last year, and I hemmed and hawed and thought about it, and then I thought about it. But there was a specific date that it would be very important for me to meet if I were going to buy it. And that date was before the end of the year because of tax reasons. So if I didn't buy it then, the chances were I could lose thousands of dollars of money in taxes because there was no guarantee that the tax benefit would still be there in the following year. And so it was late in the year. It was like November when I set out to achieve that, and I received that piece of equipment right before the end of the year and was able to take advantage of that. And it's because at that random time I just decided finally to do it. I mean, I could have decided this on January 1st and had the entire year's use of this machine, but no, I was procrastinating. Which is something I do. And so that random time worked for me because I set my goal and I knew I had to work hard to achieve it. And sometimes that's how I'm driven. So, this was really as I needed it.
Yeah. And I think that's really where I believe that as you're listening and whenever you're listening to this podcast episode, you may be listening to this at the halfway point of the year that has started in 2018. You may be listening to this, at in the first quarter or wherever time. You don't have to wait until the year rolls around. Mm-hmm. If you feel having been convinced by listening to this podcast, you need to start setting a goal and do what we're outlining here. Just start it. Just write it down and know what you want to do. Write it down. Break it down in small parts and just get started.
Mm. Yep. And, if you're going to break it down, there's many ways you can break it down. There's no need for you to be worried about setting a goal for an entire year at a time. You could set a goal for a week or a month or quarterly. There's no real rhyme or reason. In fact, it's probably easier if you set a goal for the week.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Because it gives you a finite amount of time and, a specific goal that you've got to achieve in that short period of time, like we did with a podcast by Friday. That was a week that we did that.
I think, like, I have a goal right now which I've been doing for the last few months, but the goal is to write 5 emails per week and send to my email list. And so each week, starting on Mondays, I decide, well, okay, this week I'll be writing on this topic. And my goal is, I could say, hey, I want to write a year of emails. Well, that year is broken down into months. Mm-hmm. It's broken down into weeks. And I decided, okay, every single week I want to write 5 emails. But I just think of the email, that one email I need to write today.
Mm-hmm.
I write that one email today, I have 4 more to do. So it helps me to manage it much better, and I feel less stressed when I have it that way than when I think like, oh man, I got to write 5 emails. Oh, I got to write 20 emails this month. It's seeing so much. But by breaking it down to, okay, 20 this month, but it's just 5 this week, or just 1 today.
I have a good friend and mentor who has a podcast called the Intensely Positive Podcast, and that's Calvin Ringgold Jr. And Calvin, I've known him for nearly 6 years. Calvin has written an email to his group, and I'm not just talking a 1 or 2 line thing, but an email that discusses a topic every single day of those 7 years, and he calls it his daily dose. Of his, and he just an email machine. And I admire that. But he set his goal. He wanted to go out and have interaction and contact with his group. So imagine 7 years of continuous, 6-7 years of continuous emails. It's just amazing.
It's amazing, and I'm sure it has helped him to become a better writer, and so I think it's so key in that goal setting. So we've talked about then, Bill, why set goals, how do we set goals, and now when do we set goals, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the key part then is what kind of goals do we need to set? I kind of hinted at some as we were discussing these things so far, but I think we're kind of just going deep and just driving this. This is the meat, I believe, of this whole podcast episode, because we want you as you're listening to think, to now start thinking, what kind of goals can you set for yourself?
Mm-hmm.
And this is so important.
Yeah, it is. It is very important. And I think that we should attack this the way that, you mentioned in Stephen Covey's book about starting with the end in mind and working backwards, because there's going to be categories that we need to address to achieve our entire goal. And because of that, we can apply that thought process of where we're trying to get to what we want to achieve, and break it down into maybe 5 categories of areas that we need to set goals in.
I like that, because I think it gives them a way to start thinking, because sometimes you hear goals and it's all blurred and muddy, and okay, what kind of goals do I need to set? And so I think we're going to help you and give you these categories that I believe you can work with and decide which of them, or how many of them, or if all of them may be what you want to do. We would not advise to do all of them, but at all one time, but you can pick and choose where you want to start.
Yeah, and most of this is applying to your goal as a listener. For one of the reasons you listen to this show is because you want to have a podcast.
Yes,
and you want to achieve that very quickly. And one of the reasons a lot of people think about having a podcast is they think that it will provide some financial reward in the end to them, and that is one major area where you need to set your goals. What is your financial goal for the year? What is it that you need to or want to achieve that will, make your home life better? That'll make your, it easier for you to pay your bills, or have the extra income to go visit places that you've never been to before. You need to set a financial goal.
That's a key thing. As a matter of fact, I'm creating a landing page right now for a website that I'm putting together about starting a business online from home. And shameless plug right there. but
what's the URL, Kingsley?
The URL is startabusinessonlinefromhome.com. And what happened is that landing page I'm creating as we're speaking is for that person who wants to create extra income, because they know they want to have extra income for that vacation, or to have a college, to pay their bills, to pay off all their bills, be debt free. And so the financial goal would be that I want to make $100,000 this year, for example, or six figure, whatever that might be for you. Well, okay, let's start with that. That's the end in mind. So $100,000, how much do you need to make per month to make $100,000? Well, you have 12 months in the year. You need to make at least $8,000 and some change to make $100,000 this year. So each month you need to make $8,000 and some change. Well, what does that look like per week? Well, you need to make at least $2,000 and change per week. That would help you to make $100,000 this year. Well, how much would that be per day? Well, about $320 something, I think. If my math is correct here, I'm in doing my head, but about 300 and change you would need to make per day for a 7-day week to accomplish. So if you do a 5-day week, say working, so you're not working 7 days, for a 5-day week, well, you need to make at least 400 and change per day to make $100,000 per year. Now, it sounds more manageable that way. I could make $400+ per day, and if I did that consecutively for the whole year, I would make $100,000 right then and there.
Yep, because you knew what your goal was and you worked backwards from it.
Yep.
And that is very key. And I keep stressing that over and over again throughout the episode. Knowing where you're trying to get and then working backwards. It's funny. Before we move on and into the next of the 5 areas that we were discussing, I would like to mention a book that I recently read that I found valuable, and maybe the readers will too. It's called The Richest Man in Babylon. And you can get that on Audible. We'll throw a link into the resources page of the podcast in the show notes for that book. And it is just a series of stories that talk about how to achieve your financial goal. In this case, and how to manage your money, and it's told like an old parable from the Bible or whatever, except that it's Babylon, which is kind of the opposite of the Bible. But anyway, in that book, one of the first things they said was to start with your goal in mind and break it down backwards. And when I was reading that, I about jumped up out of the chair and saying, "Yes, see, it's here." So, Kingsley knows how excited I was about this book. I couldn't wait to tell him about it earlier. So.
Yeah, and I know I have to. It's one of my new reading. My new reading to list. Let's try it again. It's my new book to add to my reading list of books. So thanks for letting me know that. And that's at podcastbyfriday.com/resource. You'll be able to find that what Bill just mentioned just now. Yeah.
And one of the reasons I'm reading so many books is because I set a goal. I heard that the 1% of the population that owns all of the wealth in the country, basically. One of the things about the most successful entrepreneurs in the world is that they read, on average, 60 books a year. Whereas the average person maybe reads 3
or maybe 1.
Yeah. So that was one of the goals that I set for myself, to read 60 books a year. And I count Audible books in that list. And I have 7 more books to go.
Wow.
Before the year ends. So if I don't make it, I don't care. I'm closer than I've ever been. But I'm planning to make it. So, that's pretty cool. And that's a goal I had that, I'm working on. So, moving on.
To make a point, Bill, this past week, a couple of weeks ago, I was speaking at an event, and one of the questions that was asked is how many people here, it's about 80+ people at the event, how many people here have read one book this year? Mm-hmm. And I'm telling you, you're just spot on. I would say 6 or 7 people, about less than 10% of the people in that room, raise their hands that they read 1 or more book so far this year. Mm-hmm. And these are professionals.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think it makes that point. So the next one, in what kind of goals we can set, we talk about financial goals. Now, as you, as a listener, Bill hinted that you're thinking about podcasting or content creation, a content creation goal is very important for you.
This is the section of our show where we would normally pause for a word from our sponsor. Now, if you would like to be the sponsor of the Podcast by Friday show, and you have a product or service that you feel would be of benefit to new entrepreneurs starting their new podcast, and contact us at podcast@podcastbyfriday.com, and we'll see if you'd be a good fit.
Now, as you, as a listener, Bill, hinted that you're thinking about podcasting or content creation, a content creation goal is very important for you, for your podcast, but also for if you're a blogger and you want to write blogs and show notes. This is very important. So when we mention content creation, Bill, and I mentioned the ideas, what would that look like? Because a person might be thinking, as listening right now, okay, well, how do I do that? Because it's more of it's not like a financial goal, you know?
One of the things that we did not like about this past year in Podcast by Friday is we lacked consistency on how frequently we put out our episodes and had content ready to go. And so when we were discussing our goals setting strategies just last week, actually it was 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
When we did it, we went through and we addressed content creation. We said, look, we'd like to be weekly. We'd like to put out an episode every week. What do we have to do that? So, well, we need to come up with topics and ideas that we would be able to use. So we set our goal. We wanted 52 episodes. That's one a week, 52 weeks in the year. And we said, all right, good. So Kingsley and I sat down and we had a brainstorming session where we just threw out ideas. And, the results of that are in this document that we're both looking at right at the moment, where we took those ideas that we came up with, like maybe we were talking about money. Well, money involves sponsorship, or maybe using a service like Patreon or e-commerce, or, the cost involved in doing a podcast or whatever. Maybe it was resources. Okay, well, we need microphones, or we need to buy, use this software or that. And we just brain dumped all those ideas down onto paper. We didn't edit. We just wrote them down and we did that for maybe 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah,
back and forth between us.
I think we had to decide we didn't want to spend a whole day doing it, so let's just put a timer on and let's go.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I forgot that. We used a program called Timer Plus, and we just typed 15 minutes and hit the. It's a little app on the iPad, and it started a countdown timer, and so we said go, and we just started writing these things down. Thankfully, Kingsley can type. And we wrote them all down. And when we were done, we had more than 52 down on the page. But we went through and we looked to see, okay, did we duplicate anything? Did we, was that? And we got them all down. And then we took the next step after we got all those done. We organized them into like groups and topics. And it was not intentional. But it seemed to work out that when we were done, there were 12 major topics that we had covered. And how many months are there in a year? 12.
Oh. Yeah, it really was, to me, as I sat down and looked back and we were having put all the things down and go and put it in the categories and in the months, and then it's all worked out that way. And so I think it's for us deciding that we need to create content this year and be different than last year. As we've heard before, if you want to get different results, you've got to do things differently and change some things. And we wanted to change our results for 2018 than we had in 2017. And so we did that for our content creation for our podcast. But if you're a blogger, same thing applies. What are the things you want to write about? And you might, what's your topic? What do you want to address? And just do a brain dump. Don't edit, just do a brain dump and don't stop. Put
Yeah.
a timer on and go for it.
And don't be afraid to borrow ideas either.
Right.
If you saw somebody's podcast or article or blog post that you admired, and you know enough about that subject, or you want to learn enough about that subject, make your own.
Yep.
There's nothing wrong with that. And then you're going to learn something different from everybody who does their own thing, because no two people are identical and none of their experiences are identical. So it'll be fresh content. Don't worry about that.
I mean, even go back to my email list, the content creation idea. Each week, I get ideas from all kinds of places. I could listen to a podcast or read a book or whatever it is, read a story or something, and then it pops an idea. And as Bill said, I just put my own spin on things and run it through my own filter, and it looks and sounds a whole lot different than the other person who wrote or read or have podcasts, audio or otherwise. I was able now to put that in my own way, and that's my new creation, my new content. So that is very important for you as a content producer. You've got to have, and I recommend you probably have a calendar, and an annual calendar, and then or quarterly, whatever the case might be, and spread it out. So each month you're going to do X number of podcast episodes, which is, we can probably just jump there to the kind of goals you can set as a podcaster, and we could just kind of dovetail them, Bill, into podcast episodes. We wanted to create or have 52 podcast episodes this year in 2018, and we decided that we want to, then what would that look like? It means we have to have 4 podcast episodes each week.
Mm-hmm.
And so we decided, okay, what day
each month
do we?
Actually, yep.
So for each month. I'm sorry, for one and then one each week. Then we even went further. What day should we record that episode and have it ready to be released again on another day? So we broke it down, as we discussed earlier, into the smallest portion possible. So from 52 episodes to 4 episodes per month to 1 per week, and then what day to record, what day to have it released.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's because we started with our end goal in mind and worked backwards to achieve it. I said it again.
and we said it earlier, Engel Jones, that because we saw his approach, and his whole idea was to have, I think it was 800 plus episodes, interviews done by a certain time. And he decided when he wanted to have it done by. And he would constantly post in his Facebook group, I've done this much, I have this much more to go. And when I do the math, I'm saying there's no way he's going to accomplish that. But the point is, as you made earlier, was what if he did not accomplish 800 episodes? Well, he's much farther ahead than he was if he had not started. So I think start someplace. Maybe you might want to do, an episode every 2 weeks, depending on your schedule. But whatever it is, start with the end in mind, work backwards in small bites, and then start there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, let's move to a topic that you briefly mentioned earlier about your email list. Did you have specific goals for email when you started?
Yes, I had for a list growth. I wanted to grow this year my list by 320. I think it was 320 new subscribers to my email list. Mm-hmm. And I had that number down. However, where I fell short was what we're discussing today. I did not break down in, okay, how many per week, how many per day, and what would I need to do to go after that many new subscribers, mm-hmm. which is very important in this whole idea of email list building. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to grow my email list by 300 plus, and I'm far behind on that number, but I when I said earlier that I'm working myself on getting this goal setting thing better or more perfected than I have it. This is one of the areas I'm working on, because when I look back this year in 2017, I said, okay, Kingsley, you had this email list growth. What were some things you had in place, written down, not in your head, but written down to get those new subscribers? And I didn't have many things written down. And that's where I think I knew I fell short.
I think you learn so much from setting a goal and not achieving it than you would if you had instant success once you set your goal, because you can look back at the things that you did that worked and the things that you did that didn't work, and you can adjust and do more of the things that worked, or maybe change up your pattern. So you have been writing emails more frequently. I mean, I see that. I'm on your email list. I see the things that come through, and so the frequency for you isn't the issue, but it's the giving the person maybe an opportunity to subscribe to your list. Maybe that was falling short at the beginning. Did you have some
like an incentive, like a call to action,
a call to action? That's exactly what I was reaching for. Did you have something that called them to subscribe to your email list? And if not, can you add something like that?
Yeah. And I think, I did have some things, but at points I was not aggressive enough. You know how some people will constantly call you to action and say, hey, go to this website and have a landing page and all of that. And whenever you're doing something, and I'm sure as you're listening here, you may not have a team around you yet, and you're doing everything yourself.
Sure.
At times it becomes overwhelming. And so you might find yourself sometimes like, oh, man, one more thing to do. And I felt that way. And so I failed in that regard,
Kingsley, you are not alone. You're in great company. And when I look at the people who have been building email lists and who started, late at the process and were underutilizing them, the person who comes to mind first is our friend and mentor, Pat Flynn.
Yeah.
Pat has an amazing audience with an amazing income that comes in every month from his podcasting in the Smart Passive Income podcast world. But he waited nearly 3 years before he started an email list. 3 years, and you talk to him and he says, well, one of the things I regret the most was not starting an email list and not sending them anything. And then he compounded the error by not ever offering a product that his listeners could buy from him. Just recently in the last year, he offered his first course. And, he's having wild success with that. And he's like, why didn't he do it before? So don't kick yourself. I mean, Pat's a multimillionaire. That's something that we would strive for or would love to achieve and are not there yet. But, if he can make that mistake and triumph over it, so can we, and, use him as an example. So, grow your email list. Period. Smack on my head, because I don't do that enough. I've got a Facebook group with 11,000 people, but an email list of 1,000. What's up with that?
I know we talked many times about, because of your email list, and as you are a new podcaster, or you may have had your podcast going for some time, and if you have not yet started your email list, we want to just stress and emphasize and push and whatever we need to do. Start your email list right now. Do something, give an incentive, call to action, even if it's a one-page PDF, just something, 5 minutes of something, whatever it is, give that away and just begin to build a relationship with those individuals, because they're the ones eventually. 'Cause I remember even going back to Pat, someone has hijacked his website and it was down for a few days. And Pat said, Had he not have his email list of how many 100,000 people to let them know what's going on, he'd be in the dark, lights out. Mm-hmm. That's it. But he had some way now to communicate with his audience and let them know what was going on. And he didn't skip a beat because of that. So I want to encourage you, get your email list, decide on the number of new subscribers, and begin to build. Just start small if you need to, because it's okay. Start somewhere and make that a goal for 2018.
Now, this is, I'm just going to say this and move on. One of the reasons I have a Facebook group is to interact with my audience. One of the downsides of having a Facebook group was that there was no method in which to collect their email so that I could send them something in case Facebook ever fell or whatever. Now there is a solution for that, and Facebook has allowed you in groups to ask questions of your audience before they sign up to become new members. And so you can put in a survey, ask them what it is that they need help with in one question, and another question, ask them for their email.
Yeah.
Since I started implementing that just a little over 2 weeks ago, I've received just over 50 new emails.
Wow.
And of the people who have tried to get on my email list, the percentage equals 37. So 37% awesome. Of the people have answered the question and given their email in order to receive more information from me. So don't worry that it's late to the game. Just, do it. Just do it. Get your email list and grow it. Okay, moving on.
That's awesome, Bill. That's awesome to hear that, man. So we talked then about the kind of goals, financial, content creation, your email list, and number of podcast episodes. This other one we want to talk about, this final one, I think is so important. We saved it for the last for a reason, because it's personal growth. It's so important for us as content creators, as business owners, as podcasters, however you want to label yourself, to be growing and constantly making certain that you are filling yourself to give out. And it comes through personal growth. And there's a number of ways to do that. For me, one of my value statements or core values is learning. Mm-hmm. And I want to make certain that I'm always learning. And you mentioned earlier about reading books as a goal. Therefore, for me to learn, I've got to then do a number of things. And one of those things I do as well is to read, is to make certain I have a book reading goal for that year, and try to get through, whether it's, reading a physical book or audio or ebook, a combination of those things, so I can learn and get better at what I do. So personal growth have to be a mission of yours at all times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the ways that, aside from reading, how much emphasis I placed on reading. I mentioned, my goal to read 60 books this year. Well, I think that is one way that I'm growing. I know that growth is coming because my mind is just bursting with ideas that I receive from all these, different books on different topics. But one other place that gets my mind going and exploding is when I'm attending conferences like the Podcast Movement Conference. Just the sheer number of topics that they discuss and the number of people that I meet from all areas of the country just blows my mind and gets me hyper excited. And every time I come back from a conference, I have massive growth.
I love conferences myself, and I'm telling you, I made it a goal of mine to attend, again, going back to the idea of goals, to attend, 1 or 2 conferences per year. I mean, a major conference, because again, it's a goal I must set, and it's part of my personal growth. Because when I go to conferences, not only do I learn, like you're saying, new information coming in, but what I love about that is meeting new people, networking. Oh, man, I'm telling you, how many people I've met through attending conferences and build relationships with, and they're friends of mine today.
Oh, yeah.
It's I mean, that's where you and I physically met at Podcast Movement, right?
Oh, yeah. I think about, how different my life would have been had I not attended the conference and not met you and not met Joel Boggess and not met Russ John and not met Marianne, just on and on and on. And, Pat and Pat Flynn and Cliff Ravenscraft and Dan Miller and all these people that I met as a result of attending a conference and networking. Just so powerful. So powerful.
As we've mentioned, and I've may have heard a statement that, your net worth is in your network. And so I find that by going there and networking with people, they can help elevate you and your work and your, in ways you probably would never be able to get otherwise. So I would strongly, strongly encourage you to attend conferences and workshops and network with people of all kinds, not just in a podcast realm, but outside the podcast realm as well.
Yeah, and don't let the fact that you're an introvert stop you from doing it, because I was very introverted. One of the things that one of the goals I set myself for the time when I attended the first Podcast Movement conference was to talk to people while I was there, because I'm the kind of guy who will go into a room, observe everything, never say a word, nod at people, and just kind of walk away or make small chit-chat, make one comment, and then I'm gone, because I'm very introverted. You may not be able to tell that from my podcast persona, but I am very, very introverted, and I set a goal. I was going to meet people, and one of the people I wanted to meet was Kingsley.
And I'm glad you actually broke out of your introvert nest, so to speak, for that Podcast Movement, because when I saw you and we met, and to me, I look back and here we are co-hosting a podcast. We're doing business together. We talk every week, and had that not, I'm glad you actually challenge yourself and get out of your comfort zone, because that has made this possible. And so I believe, as an example, we're a case study for that. So I want to say to you, as you're listening, make certain that you make your personal growth a priority, because you meet a Bill or a Kingsley, or in a setting like that really could take 10x where you are in your life, whether it's financially or otherwise, right? So we want to encourage that for you, to make sure personal growth is a priority.
Yeah, and the other priority that you need to focus on is training.
Yeah.
And it may seem like I'm jumping off at a tangent, but we're still talking. All of this still basically relates back to the conference, going to a conference. When I went to the Podcast Movement, I went there and took a training class, and that was where I met Joel Boggess. And he helped me to get in my mind the steps needed to get a podcast going. Okay. And that's all I needed. By taking the training course that he was offering that day, I was able to get the information that I needed and the processes to complete my task. The other major factor for me was a challenge from Matt Miller to do it by the end of the week. But the training, without the training, it wouldn't have been possible. And you, our listeners, can get the training that you need to launch your podcast. We've given it to you in episodes 19 through 30.
29.
30. Yeah. So, that's not an excuse. Invest in yourself. Go get training on what it is that you want to do from somebody who knows how to do what you want to do.
And, that is, maybe it's a webinar, maybe it's a Udemy or Udemy, depending on how you pronounce that, course you can buy online. But invest in yourself. Whatever area of training you need, go after it, because you will never be able to become better at what you do if you don't get input from outside yourself. Mm-hmm. And we are offering training through our podcast episode. This episode right now on Goal Setting for you, it's a training we're offering you through audio. And if you want to go deeper and further and say, hey, you know what, this was great, but how can we work with you guys? How can we get some additional training? Well, that is something we also offer and you can reach out to us. And some of those ways you can do that, of course, is you can join our podcast by Friday group on Facebook. But you can also email us directly at podcastbyfriday.com. Because these are ways you can connect with us directly, so we can actually get some more work with you to do that.
Now, you can contact us through our email or through the Facebook group. And, one of the other goals we set is that we were going to give you something actionable in every episode, and we can start now instead of waiting for next year. Let us give them a head start on their goal setting, Kingsley. Why don't we offer them a PDF that they can get, which has the 5 kinds of goals to set and a checklist for those?
It's a great idea. I think, again, having that, I believe, would be very, very helpful, because a point of reference, and you will get a brief, just a short paragraph around each of these in that one-page document we'll send you. And for you to get that, you, again, just go to podcastbyfriday.com/goals. And that will get you the download. You can go get that download right away. Send it to your email box right away. So you can, again, go to podcastbyfriday.com/goals.
Fantastic. This has been a great episode. It's our last episode for 2017, and it's very appropriate that we talked about the goals that we have for 2018 and shared with our listeners, how they can go about setting goals and achieving them.
And so I hope that you will end the year as you prepare for 2018. And also that we would love to hear from you what it is you've done. So join us in the Facebook group, share ideas with those others who are there, and make it where we can just encourage one another and see how this episode was how helpful this episode was for you and what you've done.
All right. Fantastic. Folks, thank you for listening into this episode of Podcast by Friday. And we're wishing you nothing but success in achieving your goals in 2018. I'm Bill Griggs.
And I'm Kingsley Grant.
Thank you for listening in. Podcast by Friday. Take bold action to create your minimal viable podcast today. Check out new episodes at podcastbyfriday.com or on iTunes or Spreaker.